if they ever do a remake of the movie, you'll have to be in it. And what about that fella that's with you? Do you think you can make a John Wayne out of him?
I don't know. Paul's a little... Well, he is a quiet man, though. He's a Belfast man, so he doesn't say much. It all incriminates him.
Kathy, you and Bob, you can both kind of jump in. Our microphones are not the greatest today, as you can see, so you can alternate between your questions, whoever you think wants to answer it. But now, who are the Kilbane brothers? If for anyone that doesn't know what we are talking about.
Well, I think, now obviously I'm too young to have remembered who the Kilbanes were back in the day, but there are people here who do remember it. And unfortunately what they're known for is the murder of Marlene Steele, Judge Steele's wife. But it needs to be made clear that they did not commit the murder of Marlene Steele, even though they murdered Marlene Steele.
Yes, right.
And that's not the case. Yes, they were involved in a roundabout way, and they had knowledge of it, but they didn't actually commit murder. And on the back of not having actually committed murder, they have now served 35 plus years in prison.
And the person that actually did it?
Did no time.
No time?
No, or very little time. I mean, months, if any.
The person actually did about 8 years, I believe. And he used the Marlene Steele case. He never actually done time on the Steele case itself. He used the Marlene Steele case as a catapult to get him out of prison, and he did that by agreeing to testify against the judge and Owen and Marty, and that led him back to the streets and led to the incarceration of the brothers.
Now there's this is, putting it mildly, is a very complicated case, and I just like you referred to there, I talk to many people and I bring up the Kilbanes, and the first thing to do is, just like you said, Kathy, those are the guys that killed Marlene Steele. That's the thing, the first thing I think we're trying to dispel here is get the word out, they didn't do that. But there's a lot more to this case than just that. So would you be able to walk us through, between the two of you, walk me and our listeners through what exactly happened, or how we can get our listeners to understand fully what really happened and why you think that they should be out of prison?
Well, I think, unfortunately, Martin and Owen are, they got caught up in the Cleveland culture of the day, which was that there were, Cleveland had a problem with organized crime, with the mafia, Danny Green, who has recently come back into the public eye, and there was almost like a vendetta with the police and the prosecutor's office to get anybody that was part of this organized crime. And unfortunately for Martin and Owen, they happened to be the last people standing when all of, everybody had already been arrested or had been killed, and they were easy. We're going to put somebody behind bars who we feel is part of the organized crime scene in Cleveland and make the public feel better that somebody's going to jail. Mm-hmm. And while yes, they were party to a crime, the penalty, they're almost paying the price for every bad guy in Cleveland in the 1960s and 70s, because they were the last people there to prosecute.
Is it true that they've served the longest?
You have to remember that they did not actually pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. They did not actually enter the home. They did not actually have anything to do with the actual shooting of Marlene Steele itself. Their role in this and their involvement comes from their cooperating with the judge in setting this up.
Okay. Now, when you say the judge, you mean Judge Steele?
I do.
We don't mean any of the other judges. We mean Judge Steele, who died in prison, by the way.
He did die. He died in... actually, he was a free man for one day. I think it was... I can't remember who the governor was at that time.
Celeste.
Yeah. It was Celeste that commuted his sentence, and he went straight to a nursing home. He was dying of cancer at the time. He lived one day in freedom and passed away.
Now, let me jump ahead here a little bit. There's a lot of complications about the old parole board law and the new parole board law. And one of the reasons that the Kilbanes are still in jail, they got out once, right?
But they were out
Well, you
on
want to
field
start
bond.
right there when they got out on parole.
They weren't out on parole. They had actually had their conviction. Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the lower court's decision, and they unfortunately had to return to prison. Since that time, the Supreme Court has ruled that the very issue that they were released on is in fact constitutional, and if they were today able to appeal their case once more, they would be released on that technicality.
Mm-hmm. So could you tell me what the difference is between the old rule of the parole and the new rules?
Well, it's actually old law inmates and new law inmates.
And they come under this, right?
They come under old law. In 1996, was it, Bob?
97.
97. There was truth in sentencing, which basically, you know, we're used to people getting 15 to 20. Well, now people get what's called flat time, and they do only the amount of time that they've been given, so they don't have to see the parole board anymore. So if you're sentenced to 5 years, you do 5 years, whether you try to rehabilitate yourself or not.
Basically, under the old law, the difference between the new law and old law was that the old law was indeterminate sentencing, meaning that if you were doing, like, for example, a 7 to 25 year sentence, good time automatically applied. You were doing 8 months and 14 days on a year, so that was automatically applied. So if you're doing a 7-year sentence, you could get out probably in about 4.5, 5 years. What has changed here is they've taken what we call the tails off the sentencing. In other words, you're no longer doing 7 to 25. You are doing like 8 years when you go to prison. You actually know when you're being released the day you stepped in the door. That, compared to the old law prisoners, is that they have tails. They're under the scrutiny of the Ohio Adult Parole Authority. It is their determination on when they can leave. And because sentences like Owen and Martin's is 15 years to life, they become eligible for parole in 15 years. There's no good time for people doing first-degree murder or aggravated murder, as it's now called. So they would do the actual 15-year sentence, and then they would become eligible for parole. Unfortunately, their tail, which is the indeterminate part of the sentence, is life. This gives the parole board the opportunity to actually keep them for the rest of their lives if they want to do that. And I think that for a lot of the old law inmates in the prison, John Bragg, Ronnie Starks, Bart Margroff, these guys are doing ungodly amounts of time, and many of them weren't even the perpetrators of the crime. Mm-hmm. They were conspirators.
The parole board of the state of Ohio, how many people on the parole board? Is it 9 or 10?
There's 9. There has to be an odd number, or else they'd have even votes.
But tell me if I'm wrong here. At one time, there was probably 40,000, 50,000 people that the parole board was serving. Is that about? Would that be right?
Yeah.
And how many is it today?
There's probably approximately 7,000 old law inmates left in the system.
Well, why do we need the same number of parole officers for 1/7 or 1/10 the prisoners?
Well, it keeps them employed. I mean, it would become a part-time job as opposed to a full-time job. If they had to consider, they don't have to consider half as many people as they used to, so now it's a part-time job, which encourages them to maintain their employee by ensuring that they don't parole the old law prisoners. So they do what they call as a flop. So you go to the parole board and they'll send you, they won't parole you, they'll give you another 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
So I know you're not saying it, but I think I can say it. So it's in the parole board's best interest to have as many people on parole as possible, or in the parole system. It keeps their jobs.
Well,
correct.
They would deny that. They would deny that to the bitter end. But in actuality, there's truth to that. The definition of their job description would change drastically if they were to release all the old law inmates. Now, understand that there's some guys that just aren't parolable.
Right.
Guys that have killed police officers, they're never going to see the light of day again.
Mm-hmm.
guys that have molested children and killed them, they're never going to see the light of day again. And rightfully so. I mean, that's what the prisons were designed and created for. But there's so many of the old law inmates that have done more than their time. They've done the time for 3 murders. And they're still being held.
Kathy and Bob, I want to come back and talk to you about who the Kilbane brothers are today, because I've met them and I have my own opinion. I want to hear you talk a bit about it, though. Will you do that?
Absolutely.
In the meantime, I'm going to go over here to Colleen.
We met the Kilbanes through the AOH, and they joined the Medina chapter of the AOH, the Irish Brigade, several years ago. And Paul and I, coming from Belfast, we have a different experience with prisoners, because in the north of Ireland, we have a lot of dealings with prisoners. You know, every other person on your street has been incarcerated. So we really felt the need to reach out to Owen and Martin, and have been visiting them ever since. So the people they are today, they're dads and uncles. So, you know, I've gained a dad in Owen and an uncle in Martin, and you know, if I allow them to parent me, so they treat me as if I'm their kid, so I get grounded if I do stuff that they don't like, and they forget what age I am, but they still ground me. Last year I wanted to get a motorcycle, and and they decided that they were going to ground me for wanting to get a motorcycle. So, I mean, they're just ordinary 60-year-old men who want to have ordinary lives. And, you know, they want to see their families and their kids, and they want to play an active part in people's lives. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's like having a dad and an uncle. And they're very bossy, and I get grounded all the time.
I always enjoy it when I go to visit them. They're so well informed. You can talk to those guys, well educated, and a lot of it is, well, they applied themselves when they went into prison. A lot of people go into prison and they don't take advantage of it. The Kilbane brothers, they really have. And I think, this is my opinion, if those two fellas got out, they would be great assets to society. Some people would say, oh yeah, well, they're old, they're 63 in their 60s now, but they still have a huge amount to contribute to society because, again, what they've learned. I think Martin could be one of the greatest advocate for young people not adopting the criminal ways if they went around to high school, spoke to...
You know, prison it's the Ohio Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. And one has to believe that the purpose of it is to correct bad behavior and to rehabilitate. Unfortunately, my dad was murdered in front of my mom and my sister and myself, and we were very young, and we ended up in a position where my mom was a single parent. She was a military wife. She wasn't prepared for that, but she made the best out of a bad situation. And what she taught us was, you can't hate everybody, you can't judge everybody, and you can't spend your entire life letting the fact that you're a victim define you. And you have to find the good in people. And so I guess I was in a unique situation where I was able to see and be forgiving of Martin and Owen and see beyond what defined them in this community, that they were somehow involved in the murder of Marlene Steele. So, you know, I love them for who they are. I love them as just the men that they are, that they're a dad to me and an uncle to me, and they have my best interest at heart all the time. I mean, Owen's a great financial planner. He pushed me to refinance my house. I mean, he's bossy he's like a dad in that way. And Martin's the same. You know, we exchange books, or we say, I read this or I read that. And they're constantly learning and changing, but they constantly want to be a part of life on the outside. And so they take an active part in Paul and I's life on a continuum, like parents.
What do you think has sustained them through the years, kept them going? Because when I walk out of that prison, I always, JC and I often talk about it when we're leaving, and I say to JC, my goodness, I don't know what I would be like if I was confined for 35 years in that institution.
Well, and I think it's very hard when you start, you know, I was 7 years old when Owen and Martin were incarcerated. And if you look at all the things that we take for granted today, like ATM cards, you know, that you don't actually ever go into a bank anymore to get money, or the internet, or, you know, GPS and cars, all those things are things that they've never had a tangible experience of having seen an ATM machine work. And I think that what keeps them going is just that desire to be free and to see the outside and to see the world as it has changed. You know, they're at a standstill and the world keeps spinning around outside of them. And Bob can speak to how different it is. You know, you're running to catch up, essentially, when you're released. You know, the world hasn't stood still.
I want to talk to Bob for a minute. For people that haven't met Bob before, heard him on the program before, Bob, you have a very interesting kind of a background also. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, like Kathy, I was the victim of my father being murdered when I was 6 years old. But I'm also the perpetrator of a violent crime. And for the listening audience that doesn't know who I am, I was Owen's cellie in Grafton. We shared a cell for about 6 years. Both Martin and Owen are more than friends, they're brothers. And I love them both dearly. I made Owen a promise on the day I got released that I wouldn't stop until he was released, which brought me to J.C. Sullivan, which brings me to this show. It's been a constant battle trying to help the brothers and help them gain their freedom again. I did 25 years. I shot somebody in a shootout, and I've been out for 3.5 years now. Like them, I educated myself in there and became a paralegal. And the brothers are amazing. They help me in many ways, both of them. Both of them are highly educated. They have several degrees. They would be an asset to the community if released. Like I said, the day I walked out of there, I made Owen a promise that I wouldn't stop until he also had gained his freedom. Because they deserve it. Like many of the other guys in there. There's a lot of guys in there that deserve their freedom that are being held. It's unnecessary. I fortunately only had to serve 25 years of a life sentence. And it was through the grace of God that I was released. And, you know, I had a wife and daughter that really pushed and helped me immensely. And I'm thankful for that.
So it seems to me like there's an awful lot of political machinations have gone into this thing through the years of the Owen and Martin Kilbane case. Is there a good chance it's coming to an end?
Well,
that maybe there's a parole hearing coming up in July.
We have a parole hearing coming up in July. We can only pray that it's coming to an end for the brothers. They've more than served their time on this case. If you're assessing culpability, the actual triggerman never did a day. He never did a day. And it was an exchange of his testimony. They were actually after Judge Steele more than they were the Kilbane brothers, but taking them too was a feather in their cap.
How about the FBI agent? You want to?
You're talking about Robert Ressler?
Yeah, talk about him.
Robert Ressler was one of the first FBI profilers. He was imminent in the rest of the brothers. He and Detective Walsh in the Euclid Police Department, who happened to be at Quantico, Virginia at that time, met up and started talking about the case, and the FBI turned the file over to Detective Walsh, and through that they activated a campaign to put everyone, the brothers and Judge Steele, into prison for the killing of Marlene Steele. The culpability there is Owen and Martin were two young guys. They were impressed. They had a judge that would do them favors, and the judge was leading them down this path. You know, unfortunately to say that they may be a little mesmerized by the judge and his abilities to get things done. He had an up-and-coming political career.
He was hugely popular. I
He
remember
was.
at the time.
I think he would have run for governor.
He would have been, probably would have made it.
He would have. He was immensely popular as both a politician and a judge in the legal community.
And then quickly again, Judge Steele, man we're talking about, wanted to get divorced from his wife. But no, he wanted to get rid of his wife. He didn't want to divorce her. He could have divorced her if he wanted to, but he wanted to get her out of the way permanently.
I believe that was it. He wanted her out of the way. I don't think a divorce was ever a question for him. I know that Owen several times tried to talk him out of doing what he was doing, and he didn't want to hear it. He wanted his wife dead, and he wasn't going to stop until that happened.
And again, the Kilbane brothers did not kill Marlene Steele.
No, they
did not.
They did not.
And I think it's important to know about Ressler that he has been an advocate of the Kilbane's release now as well. So, I mean, he's written letters to the parole board, even though he was the man who essentially put them away. He's written multiple letters to the parole board stating that they've done enough time, that he does not feel like they are, you know, a threat to society in any way should they be released. And this is going back as far as 1993 that he has advocated their release.
He actually appeared before the parole board on behalf of the brothers.
On behalf of them.
And told them that he felt they did enough time for their culpability in the crime, and that he felt that they should be released. And this is an FBI profiler.
Now, one of the things that's considered, I believe, in parole is what prisoners do when they get out. I don't think Martin and Owen would have any problem getting a job. I know I'd hire him in a minute. If I was talking to the last time I was in to visit him, I said to Owen, I was complaining about the computer and not knowing Excel. I wanted something on Excel. He said, I'll teach you when I get out, no problem. So I'll have that for you. Fly in no time. Knows it all. Very, very accomplished.
Owen is probably one of the most accomplished people on a computer that I've ever met, and yet he's never been actually online.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the frustrating things when we have conversations is that, you know, he hasn't actually ever had to put it in practice. So he's good at Excel, but he doesn't know what it looks like when you actually go on the internet because they don't have access to that. So it's theory.
Okay. All right, it's time to get back to the Donegal Dawn. Hearing in July will get these men what they deserve to get them out of prison. I'd love to see them out, no parole, nothing, free men.
Absolutely.
How can the community help? I know there's going to be some people out there, Kathy, that are saying, no, it's said to me often, oh, they should be there. I don't believe that, and like you said, you're a very forgiving person, and the worst thing in the world that had happened to anyone happened to you and to Bob. Both of you saw your parents die. You forgave, but the people, I'd say the majority of the people in this community would agree with what we're saying here today, that it's time to get those boys out into society.
Absolutely, and with that in mind, we've set up a website that's www.kilbanebrothers.com. And you can go there to see what's happening. There are links on the KilbaneBrothers.com to JC's blog, the Friends of the Kilbane Brothers, as well as a link to an online petition that you can sign for the brothers' release.
How important is that? Names going to the parole board. How important is it?
I think there's two prongs to that. Signing the petition is huge. It shows that the community supports the Kilbane brothers, and in addition, we have a link to write the parole board in support of the Kilbane brothers, and that also is very important to show that they have the support of the community and a community network to come back to. I always say, and you'll laugh, Owen is my date to the Mayo Ball. He's now stood me up 3 years in a row.
He sure has.
And I really, really, really wanted to go to this last Mayo Ball because the tea shop was there. So I'm hoping that I have a double date with Martin and Owen Kilbane to the Mayo Ball this October. So, you know, and we need the community support to do that.
Kathy, we're going to get him in a nice black tuxedo instead of that blue uniform they're wearing now.
Absolutely. I have the dress spot and everything. 3 years in a row I've been stood up. I need the date. I need the double date to the Mayo Ball. Paul won't dress up to the Mayo Ball, so he's shaking his head, going, absolutely
But
not.
he's a Belfast man. He's not going to go to anything for Mayo.
Well, he would, but
I think he did like him. And one Mayo man named Michael Gallen. I think.
Oh, yeah.
probably yes.
Paul knows who he was,
Yeah.
and Michael Stagg. He knows who those guys were.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so we need the public support. We need the Irish community support, and to let the brothers take part in their community and enjoy sort of their Irish heritage that they didn't have the opportunity to explore when they were younger.
All right. Would it help if anybody wrote a letter to the governor? We'd say.
Absolutely. Any letter to any person of importance will help the Kilbane brothers.
I think we're supposed to have the governor on the program here in the not too distant future.
Not only to the governor, but also to the Ohio Adult Parole Authority, letting them know that they support the release of Martin and Owen Kilbane.
They won't be mad at us for some of the things we said that weren't working hard enough.
I don't think they can get mad at the truth.
Well, and all of us are entitled to have the job we do criticized.
Yeah,
You know, I'm sure there's people who would say that about the job I do or the job you do, and say, you know what, you don't do a good job or you do a great job. So everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Let me tell you, we get criticized for the job we do here every Sunday morning. No question about it. We feel we're doing nothing if we don't get criticized. Okay, I'm glad this message from the Clan, and then.